Welcome back everyone, it's Charlie. This will be my full House of the Dragon Season 3 Episode 4 video. There are a whole bunch of Easter eggs, references to the books, WTF moments, so we will break it all down. Just so we're all on the same page, we all agree with Daemon that we're not going to tell Rhaenyra the truth about Rhaena and Sheepstealer. I'm sure this will have no consequences going forward. The episode also wound up being a really big Daeron episode too, so we'll dig into that as we go through the video, but the episode title was Tumbleton, a reference to the town of Tumbleton, where we get all of our Daeron scenes and learn about Ormund's new plot, his plan B, so to speak, because he thought that he was going to get Aemond and Vhagar, but Aemond is nowhere to be found. In reality, we just know that this is Alys Rivers' ruse. She told Criston, Cole, and Gwaine Hightower that she didn't know where Aemond was, he wasn't there, but really he's probably just stashed in one of the rooms with the weirwood beds, having all kinds of crazy visions, weirwood visions like Daemon had during Season 2. During the intro scene, they added a new scene in the tapestry of what looks like Rhaenyra meeting Torn Manderly after her rat banquet, as we then see the rat right after that torn in half, as a reference to the realm tearing apart at its seams, because we see a lot of chaos erupting across the episode, like chaos in King's Landing, chaos in Tumbleton right now with the Greens, the Blacks, also having all kinds of problems on both sides. The opening scene starts with a rabbit across the river from Tumbleton, depicting the Greens' occupation of the city, forcing the locals to help them strengthen the defenses of the city so they can guard against Rhaenyra and the Blacks, and dividing up all 15,000 of their troops into everyone's homes to also prevent Rhaenyra from easily burning them. So Ormund is already showing how clever he is, because Rhaenyra can't just burn them the way that she would normally do, because she'd wind up killing all of the people who bent the knee to her, making her seem like Maegor with teats. She makes a reference to that. Maegor returned is their way of referencing Maegor with teats from the books. They set up the subplot with one of the three moving into the house of Hugh Hammer's wife, living with her brother, one of them seeming super rapey, to set up events later in the series and what's happening with the Dragonseeds, Hugh Hammer himself, Vermithor, who's going to be watching over Tumbleton, along with Ulf White and Silverwing. So both of the Dragonseeds will be in and around Tumbleton for the next couple of episodes, which they try to seed as a sort of bomb that's going to go off in a really bad way later in the season. Like, you start to see the seeds of that across the episode. Ormund Hightower has taken Lord Footleys home. He's the person who rules over Tumbleton, taking a bath as another callback to his extreme desire for cleanliness. He ordered the messenger to be given the bath, and he uses a smelling perfume device to avoid having to smell the stench. Later, Alicent also kind of explained this, saying that he's very sensitive to smells, so that's why he was using the smelling perfume during the previous episode, and why he's burning incense here right now. And later in the episode, when he's just meeting with Daeron and the other people in the room trying to make his plans, he's also still burning more incense. We will see if this turns into some bigger plot device in a future episode, or if this is just like a weird character thing that he's going to have over the next couple of episodes. My assumption is that they'll pay this off in some hilarious way in a future episode. Lord Footleigh and his wife complain to him about the current state of affairs, naked in his tub while Daeron waits on him like a squire, because Ormund Hightower took him on as a ward when he was a baby. So he's basically been like a second father to Daeron for his whole life. They're very careful to note Ormund calls out their former loyalty to Rhaenyra, who he calls the pretender to the Iron Throne. This is also to set up the idea that he wants to put Daeron on the Iron Throne, which I thought they were pretty clear about in previous episodes too. Like, everything he does in this episode is basically giving Daeron little lessons, teachable moments about what things will be like when he's king. Like, remember to be fair, but very strict. Lord Footleigh also mentions that the town isn't very defensible, thus cutting down the trees and making more defenses, why they're trying to turn it into a more defensible place, and moving all their troops into rooms and houses with the locals so that Rhaenyra can't just easily burn them all. He also calls Rhaenyra a bitch with a dragon. He seems very proud of himself. Jon Roxton enters, also addressing Daeron as prince, just to confirm his identity for people that didn't clock it earlier. I feel like I talked about this in previous episodes. The real Daeron having different colored hair, he wasn't dyeing it or anything like that. That's just the way his hair is colored. Part of the reason why he was able to fool Daemon with the white-haired fake Daeron is because Daemon had never actually seen a picture of Daeron after he'd grown up. He'd last seen him as a baby. They have a funny moment where he gets really pissed off at Borros Baratheon, who doesn't want to send help to the Greens with support of more men and supplies, even though he sealed a marriage pact between one of his daughters and Aemond, so he should be supporting the Greens in this conflict, but it's meant to be a callback of how much of pain he was to Rhaenyra and the Blacks in the past. Like, the Baratheons hate all Targaryens equally, both the Blacks and the Greens, and Borros is trying to do the clever thing where he winds up supporting who he thinks is going to win, so that when a winner does come out in this conflict, the Baratheons Baratheons won't be reprimanded in the very severe way that the other houses who support the losers will be. He also has this funny joke where he implies Boros Baratheon can't actually read, which might be true technically. The reason why they haven't heard anything from Harrenhal or Aemond yet is because they need Vhagar. Daeron seems worried too, like he doesn't want to have to face the Black's dragons by himself with Daeron, who's the smallest current dragon capable of flight into battle right now. While this is happening, Rhaenyra has her small council meeting, as small as it is. Like, they make jokes about how small her small council is because she's missing some of the key people. She hasn't appointed all the roles yet. They note her forces, the army of Rivermen and the Winter Wolves. The Starks are coming closer, but they'd send word to them to march to Tumbleton instead, not to King's Landing, setting up the Battle of Tumbleton later this season. I think that's going to wind up being episode 7. She then names Orwyle to the small council as her maester, Grand Maester, bans the use of balls that they used to mark who was speaking at any one time before, also to show why future small council meetings later in the timeline, like the main series Game of Thrones, did not use them. You also notice that Rhaenyra pours her own cup here because she doesn't have a cupbearer currently, but it's meant to be a callback to her being her father's cupbearer in Season 1. You also notice she does have a new Queensguard now, so Daemon did appoint a new Queensguard, which was one of his jobs that she gave him earlier. Mysaria also gives her the idea to name a new Master of Coin who can solve a lot of their problems, who winds up being Torrhen Manderly, who she just met after the rat banquet. She then questions Corlys missing because he's still technically her hand and should be at the meeting, but they just had the big row over legitimizing his bastards. We get a couple different scenes of Rhaenyra and Alicent in this episode broken across the episode. She starts by asking for Alicent's help with Ormund Hightower, who Rhaenyra had never met because she'd never been to Old Town. She reminds us that it was Viserys who wanted Daeron to ward with him years ago. You also notice this meeting is happening in the Godswood too. Helaena is there with Jaehaera. It's one of the few places that Rhaenyra let them go inside the Red Keep. If it wasn't clear, Ormund is Alicent's cousin. Ormund is the son of Hobart Hightower, Otto Hightower's older brother, who was the Lord of House Hightower, so when he died, that just passed to Ormund. So Ormund is the current Lord of House Hightower in Old Town. She says when she was a young girl, she never really got to know him that well because Otto Hightower brought her to court when she was a very young girl, where she met the very young Rhaenyra and they became good friends. From what she saw of him, though, he was studious, shrewd, but also very cruel. I think the reason why she mentions that Gwaine Hightower thought that everybody was cruel is just because he's meant to be a very sensitive soul. But the idea is that they're setting up Ormund as not being an idiot, and it won't be an easy victory for Rhaenyra. Like, he's meant to be very clever. Alicent then explains why she sent Daeron away in the first place, because she felt like she wasn't that great of a mother, and she wanted Daeron to be raised in the right way as a Hightower, because all of her other sons that she raised like traditional Targaryens around the Iron Throne and at court turned out terrible in a couple different ways.
Perhaps sending Daeron away was my truest act of motherhood.
Ironically, though, by the end of the episode, Ormund makes it very clear that he raised Daeron to be just as terrible, just in a slightly different direction, so it's meant to be this huge betrayal of what Alicent wanted. In a previous episode, she also got mad at Rhaenyra, saying, "Would you get mad at me for all the things that the men around me have done?" Things that she did not want to happen. So all the crazy gaslighting and teachable moments that Ormund is giving to Daeron in the episode has been stuff that he's been doing to Daeron his whole life, and is a huge betrayal of Alicent, the same way that all the other men around her have betrayed her in different ways. Alicent is probably going to be super pissed when she finds out what has happened to Daeron and what Ormund has raised him to do over all these years. Rhaenyra then claims she wouldn't have killed Daeron had he been around when she took the Red Keep, and I do believe her when she says that. Daemon probably would not have liked that idea so much, like, no, we gotta kill all of their heirs. Which is also one of the reasons why Alicent is so worried when she discovers that Helaena is pregnant at the end of the episode with Maelor, so the show is finally doing Maelor. We'll talk about that more at the end of the video when we get to that part of the actual episode. But remember, Daemon is very stabby when it comes to any potential challengers to the Iron Throne, anybody that has a claim outside of their line. Corlys then complains about Rhaenyra to Alan as he prepares to leave the castle so he can shore up his own house after the battle and try to get rid of the rest of the Triarchy raiders who are running rampant so that they can open up the trade lines again, so his house, the Valyrians, can start earning some money again, and they can free up trade to bring more supplies into the city to free up some of their hunger problems, which is also a very, very big problem as they talk about later in the episode. They need to bring more food into the city. So even though Corlys is super pissy against Rhaenyra in this episode because of what she's done, I think he's rightfully angry. Rhaenyra should have legitimized his children. But he's also performing an important function, like they do need to open up the trade lines again. But the other reason for doing this too is that Corlys wants to leave Alan to attend her, hoping that Rhaenyra is going to warm up to him and like him and legitimize him eventually of her own accord. So a little bit of foreshadowing here, like they want to make it seem like Rhaenyra really likes Alan of Hull because he gives her a couple cool ideas later for solving some minor problems. Then we get a really big moment, a lot of foreshadowing here with Aegon and Larys Strong arriving at the area around Rook's Rest, and Aegon is now way faster on foot, you notice, since his addiction to Milk of the Poppy is worn off, and they've arrived at Sunfyre's body, who Aegon notes is still alive several times in this moments here. He says, I know it, Sunfyre is still alive, just to foreshadow Sunfyre returning. And you also notice this is the happiest, the most optimistic, hopeful he has been since he fell in battle and was burned. So if it wasn't clear, they do want to imply that Sunfyre is still alive, just in a very, very deep dragon coma, recuperating right now. We then find out that a couple local men have been making people pay to touch the dragon, so a lot of people probably come along and touch the dragon. When they try to make a move to kill both of them, Larys Strong tries to pretend that he's a Septon to save their lives and hide their anonymity. Aegon tries to speak High Valyrian a couple times to Sunfyre too, but there's no use. I think the idea, like I said, is that Sunfyre is just deep in that coma. Give it a couple more weeks, a couple more episodes. We then go back to Criston Cole and Gwaine Hightower's forces reaching Harrenhal, passing by all the people that Aemond burned with Vhagar, but no actual sign of Vhagar can be found. We'll talk about her in a second. As they start sneaking through the castle, they start hearing crumbling all around them. The castle is in a constant state of decay, even during the events of the main series. It is so big, it is just constantly falling apart, and it is a curse on anyone that tries to hold it. They then hear the goat before they hear Alys Rivers, which is also what happened to Daemon when he first arrived. Like he heard the goat, then Alys Rivers shows up. Like the goat itself is a reference to her magic. Also, people had theories that she might be the goat herself. Like she might just be changing into the goat, appearing as a goat.
Are you lost?
You notice this time she's wearing a much finer dress and a pendant, but they never really explain the context there. We'll probably have to wait till next week to find out what she's doing with Aemond. She tells them everyone at the castle's been killed by Aemond and calls herself something of a steward, which is basically what she talked to Daemon about, like she wanted the castle for herself. Absolutely love the way she messes with their heads, tells them that Aemond is no longer here, which is a lie. They also reveal that Rhaenyra took King's Landing, which they did not know, so like their hearts just sink to the ground. For the most part, Aemond is probably just having weirwood visions in some weirwood bed in some other room. She's just keeping him stashed there. Vhagar is probably just passed out sleeping in the woods off in the distance, and that's why they don't see or hear the dragon. Like, old Granny just needs a good long nap. Anytime you see Vhagar and Aemond isn't riding her, she's also napping, just sleeping on the ground. But at this point, they believe that Aemond has deserted them, and Gwaine Hightower wants to join Ormund Hightower's forces at Tumbleton, which is the right move. Like, he is making the logical call here. Criston Cole wants to stay, though, because he doesn't want to abandon their original quest, and he has this big, long speech where he calls out nobles, rich people, basically explaining that he has nothing to go back to, nothing to fall back on, because he can't go back to King's Landing to Rhaenyra, because Rhaenyra will probably hate him, or he thinks that Rhaenyra is going to hate him, and he kind of hates Rhaenyra still. And I love the way that Gwaine Hightower's look turns on him when he starts to get drunk on himself, like he starts to get high on his own supply, basically saying that we can take our smaller force, like very few amount of men, and try to go after the Rivermen. Our original goal, stop them from reaching King's Landing, even though the Rivermen and the Winter Wolves have 20 times the number of men. So Gwaine Hightower is basically like, this dude, Criston Cole, has gone completely crazy. He wants to Leroy Jenkins some of the fiercest fighters in the realm right now, the Rivermen and the Winter Wolves. So he winds up writing Ormund Hightower to explain the situation, thinking that Aemond is nowhere to be found, Vhagar nowhere to be found, so Ormund Hightower now can't depend on Vhagar, which he was planning on having to fight against Rhaenyra and the Blacks. We get a really cool scene of Rhaenyra then going to the storage in the lower levels of the Red Keep with Alan of Hull and looks on her father's things that Alicent had moved down there when Aegon moved into the king's chambers. Also a lot of the stuff that Alicent pulled down, like all the tapestries of the dragons getting it on with each other, that Viserys really, really loved and Alicent really, really hated. It was basically the Westeros version of nudie magazines, and Alicent just could not stand any of it. But the other big thing that's down here is Viserys' Lego set of the Valyrian freehold that Aegon smashed up. She makes a reference to that, saying that it's like the broken realm. The broken model is like the broken realm itself. She then explains the doom of Valyria to him and why her father wanted to build this in the first place, and also a reference in present day to the fall of the Targaryen dynasty in Westeros currently. Like all great dynasties fall, the Targaryens will eventually fall too. She calls out all the people who called Viserys a weak king. The Maesters record him as being a very weak king, and they bond together, her and Alan, over their fathers. Alan also kind of turns into a Rhaenyra whisperer in this episode when he gives her the idea about getting rid of the rats in the Red Keep using the cats. Like they see the rats climbing around in the model, and he says, you know, we used rats on the ships that I was on. So she's like, that's a great idea. So now they're just going to be sending a ton of cats around the Red Keep. So this is meant to be like a very good moment for Alan. They want to create a great rapport between him and Rhaenyra. Like she really likes him now, which is exactly what Corlys wanted. We then go back to Aegon and Larys Strong arriving at Rook's Rest. He's holding one of Sunfyre's scales, just a little bit hopeful, just hold on for a couple more episodes. Larys Strong tries to explain the situation to him, like anonymity is our friend, it's total anarchy here, even though Criston Cole left a garrison, these men are loyal to no one but themselves. They pass by the body of Meleys, which is still decaying, lying across the castle. It hasn't been that long since the battle itself. And pretend to be small folk working in the area to just hide out for the next couple of episodes, making Aegon clean the latrines. Much to his chagrin, his mouth winds up getting him in trouble later in the episode too, but calling them Tangle Tongue and Mangle Face. Back at Tumbleton, Hugh Hammer's wife is running afoul of the Green Man again, just as he, back at King's Landing, asked Rhaenyra to be the one to watch Tumbleton on Vermithor. So keep in mind that like all these things are happening with Hugh Hammer's wife in the city while he's about to be stationed around the city for the next couple of episodes. She also clocks at first that his wife being in town might be a conflict of issues if shit goes down, but allows him to take turns watching with Ulf White in Silverwing. So both of the Dragonseeds are going to be around Tumbleton for the next couple of episodes. Right where Ormund Hightower is going to be able to mess with their heads because he is very clever, he's proven in this episode, and the Dragonseeds, not so much. Which is just very bad news for Rhaenyra. Ulf then goes back to the old tavern that he used to frequent with his friends before he became a Dragonseed and notes the green slander someone graffitied on the wall. When it says Queen of Bastards, notice all the three colors are being a reference to the Dragonseeds who are bastards. So the graffiti is actually meant to be making fun of Ulf White himself, not of Rhaenyra's strong boys, Joffrey still being alive, but later she winds up being confused by this, taking it as a slight against her and her son's legitimacy. When in reality, my early theory is that it was actually one of Ulf White's drinking friends who drew this just as a jest because of his big station now as a Dragon Lord, like his friends are just making fun of him. But I think the idea is that when he sees this making fun of him, he takes it as like a huge affront. He has this huge inferiority complex to begin with and wanted to be legitimized and use the Targaryen name, which Rhaenyra would not let him do. So this is just kind of reminding him of his low station, and he's been thinking that he shouldn't have to put up with this slander like this because he has a dragon and that gives him power. So he has a huge, huge chip on his shoulder. He then goes back to his old tavern, has drinks with his former friends who call him a Dragon Lord, and pays for everybody's drinks this time. Then I love the way that they basically gas him up to ask Rhaenyra a whole bunch of favors for all of them, which she just absolutely hates the idea of. We'll get to that in a second too, because they're trying to create more of a wedge between him and Rhaenyra, the Dragonseeds and Rhaenyra just in general, for a number of different reasons. Speaking of problems brewing with the Dragonseeds, Hugh Hammer's wife and brother go to Ormond to get satisfaction for the assault against her and the other women, who is going to geld the green and break his arm. Later we also find out kill her brother too, so he's just as vicious as he is helpful. But I also think part of the idea here, the energy that they leave with, is they want it to seem like he's earned the goodwill of Hugh Hammer's wife and brother at the time. Notice he also tries to use this as another teachable moment for Daeron, like remember these lessons if you become king someday, which we're definitely going to try real soon. Orwell then tries to explain House Hightower in general to Rhaenyra and why the Hightowers are so intertwined with the Faith of the Seven. So the Hightower is in Old Town, and House Hightower ruled over Old Town for thousands of years. And remember that Old Town used to be the capital in the realm before Aegon's conquest. So the High Septon had his great sept there. So basically the Hightowers grew up for thousands of years to power alongside the Faith. So they've been linked for thousands of years. This is also one of the reasons why Ormond believes that the Hightowers are so much better than everybody else in the realm, so much more saintly, so much more deserving to rule the realm, because the capital, the ruling seat of the realm, used to be in this area. Orwyle and Rhaenyra also joke about killing the High Septon too, like, oh, if you want to get rid of him that way, the permanent way, which she also jests, like, no, we're not going to be doing that. Also because it's a callback to Maegor the Cruel, who did have a war with the Faith. Rhaenyra doesn't want to have to fight another war with the Faith right now. Maegor literally put down a rebellion of the Faith of the Seven and destroyed the former Sept and built the Dragon Pit on its bones. We then go back to the Eyrie with Daemon and Lady Jane, who absolutely cannot stand him. They have a lot of really funny moments here during this scene where she kind of lords over him. Notice that she sits way higher on her throne. This is just like the original series too. It's basically the same room, just built out in a slightly different way.
You wish to confess your crimes.
She reminds him about the death of his former wife from the Vale, who he killed with a divorce rock. And I love the way that he regards the moon door as he references, like, oh, you're so benevolent, as he's staring down into the moon door. Her throne is meant to look exactly like the one that Lysa Arryn sits on during the original Game of Thrones series. It's made from a weirwood tree. And he basically tells her, look, if you really want to get rid of me, if you hate me that much, just give me the gold that we need help with, which she is happy to do. And I love the way, like, this comedic moment with him hauling the bag, like giant heavy bags of gold onto Caraxes' back as Caraxes starts to crash out, just going crazy in a way that we've never seen Caraxes do, not listening to Daemon's commands. And it's all because he senses Sheepstealer, who's not that far away. And it's just another rare example of Daemon's dragon not obeying him, the dragons not obeying their riders, which happened to Rhaena during the Battle of the Gullet, which is one of the reasons why Jace wound up dying. Daemon also talks about this idea later when he's speaking with Rhaenyra on the matter, saying that dragons don't always obey people's commands, they don't always listen to people. But I love the reveal here and him learning the truth about Rhaena and Sheepstealer, like, oh, wait a minute, it's my daughter who I love and I haven't been around the last couple of seasons, like, been a terrible father for a hot minute. And they really have it out here with Daemon's mind spinning, trying to find a way to fix this situation. Like, look, we can take you to Rhaenyra, we'll beg for her forgiveness, explain that it was a mistake, but Rhaena is not hearing any of it, and she doesn't want to bail on Sheepstealer because of her bond, finally feeling like she belongs to someone else. She didn't really feel like she was part of the family before this because she didn't have a dragon, and being a Targaryen means having a dragon, so if you're a Targaryen without a dragon, you're kind of nobody. They do remind you that Daemon's children with Rhaenyra, Aegon, and Viserys are on their way to Pentos. She thinks that they're safe. We will see what winds up happening with that. There's still almost half the season left. But they leave things with her pleading with him, making him promise to lie to Rhaenyra so that she doesn't come after her anymore. Like, just tell her whatever you want to tell her, but I'm not leaving Sheepstealer. So I am sure there will be no lasting consequences for this, and things will be totally fine between Daemon, Rhaenyra, and Rhaena going forward this season and next season. Just wait for that bomb to go off at some point. We get another great scene of somebody crashing out in the episode when Ormund Hightower gets Gwaine Hightower's letter explaining what's happened with Aemond and Vhagar and their forces, and I love the way that he waits a beat before crashing out, chopping away at the table with his sword, and he's mostly mad that they won't have Vhagar to help them against Rhaenyra and the Black Dragons. Now they need to alter their plans, Plan B, which is, I think, where Hugh Hammer's wife in the Dragonseeds will come in eventually. Remember, they wanted to set up Ormund Hightower as a very shrewd, very clever person. We then learned that Ormund Hightower never returned any of Otto Hightower's letters over the years since Daeron would have been sent to ward with him, and ruling Old Town as a kingdom unto itself mentioned, I think is meant to be more an idea of him raising Daeron to be a king so that he could put him on the Iron Throne and control him. Which they do wind up paying off at the end of the episode when he literally tells Daeron that. So part of the idea is that Ormund Hightower styles himself the person who controls the realm, who should be ruling the realm through Daeron Targaryen, and I think the reason why he never returned any of Otto Hightower's lessons, because Otto Hightower was a Hightower, why wouldn't he be loyal to his own house, is because he didn't want any of what he calls the Targaryen stink on Daeron. Like, he was basically conditioning Daeron all these years, raising him to be the kind of leader that he could control, that he wanted him to be. Olthen has another hilarious meeting with Rhaenyra that does not go well for him, asking to grant favors for all of his friends at the tavern. Like, they got super drunk and they're like, could you ask Rhaenyra to get rid of all these problems of mine? She almost kind of seems like she can't believe all the requests that she asks of him. Like, what?
We don't have to go into that. And passage to
These
Lys.
favours are not in your name.
Also has to remind him that his dragon is too important and that he can't risk his life by going to taverns, so he's not allowed to go to any taverns anymore, and he's now basically under house arrest in the Red Keep henceforth because it's so critical that he has his dragon. This is just to further widen the wedge between him and Rhaenyra, sour their relationship, which has already been getting worse and worse through each episode. Rhaenyra does not want a situation where her Dragonseeds, these very powerful people that control nuclear weapons, do not obey her commands anymore. When he tries to tell her about the bastard graffiti, he leaves out some key context. You notice the Queensguard almost moves to behead him on the spot, but she's visibly shaken because she thought that the small folk loved her, and she mistakenly thinks that this is a reference to her strong boys, not the Dragonseeds. Like, he leaves out that context. Oh, they were making fun of me, Hugh Hammer, and Adam of Hull, not your wonderful young boy Joffrey, who is also a bastard. The whole reason why she didn't want to legitimize Corlys's bastards is because she viewed it as an affront and people would question the legitimacy of her own strong boy, which they had done in the past already. So Rhaenyra has a lot of insecurity over the idea that she is legitimate. That's why she wants to be anointed by the High Septon too. This also leads her to make another very terrible decision, which is definitely going to bite her in the butt later on, when she orders the Gold Cloaks to destroy any graffiti they find around the city and get rid of anyone they find making them, which will hurt her standing amongst the small folk who will view her more as a tyrant. So already the situation with Rhaenyra in King's Landing in the Realm is starting to deteriorate faster and faster. Back at Rook's Rest, Aegon is chagrined to learn that Rhaenyra has declared him dead, slain by Aemond, like, oh, how dare she, which Lair's strong notes is actually amazing for them, making it way easier for them to stay safe and anonymous until they're ready for him to make his grand return. Like, no, you don't want people to think that you're still alive. This whole thing with him getting into the fight with the leader and being forced to kiss his boots, I think is just to make Aegon sink to an even lower point, to make it feel like he's at an absolute low before things start to turn around for him in future episodes. Making him kiss the boots covered in crap before things start to look up for him. We get another small council meeting where Torrhen Manderly, now the new Master of Coin, mentions their inquisitions into the location of the crown's gold, which they have not located yet, just as Daemon brings back the random sheep herder's head, pretending it belongs to Sheep Stealer's rider, and you notice that Mysaria instantly clocks that it's a fake, like, oh, that is definitely not the real head. But Rhaenyra starts to lose it a little, like she starts to lose her grounding, the sound around her, like you go into her perspective and she stops hearing what everyone's saying, things drown out around her. All because it seems like she's so stuck on this. Like she tells Daemon, oh, it's great that you got the gold, but she's not going to let this whole sheep stealer thing go. So it seems like whatever Daemon tells her, even though in passing she lets him go, like, okay, this is fine, she's not going to let it go, and it's going to continue to be a much bigger problem in later episodes. Mysaria also seems like she has his number too. Like, that's definitely a rando's head, not Sheep Stealer's actual writer, so maybe Mysaria will learn the truth about Rhaena and tell Rhaenyra eventually, and that's how she learns the truth. Rhaenyra then meets with Alicent and Helaena, telling her that she's sending Otto Hightower's remains to Old Town to be interred with Alicent's mother, and gives her one of Viserys' rings. Just as Alicent is learning Helaena is pregnant with Maelor, they're actually doing Maelor on the show, which Alicent is worried about now because of what Rhaenyra and the Blacks might do, because Daemon wanted to kill all of the Green's heirs, any heirs that might challenge Rhaenyra or her line. We should also note that that big post that George R. R. Martin did on his blog, calling out Ryan Condal, getting really pissy about the show, had a lot to do with Maelor missing during Blood and Cheese during Season 2. And I think the idea is that Ryan Condal was just trying to change that storyline because of the circumstances on set that day. Like he said, it's a problem filming with children, so they're going to do the Maelor plot, but in a roundabout way. And this is just the way that they pay off Maelor from the books, doing it this way. Ryan Condal also said that they're doing something similar in changing young Aegon III and Viserys II's storyline from the Battle of the Gullet, because they were there during the book version of the Battle of the Gullet, but they couldn't film with them during the battle because of restrictions of filming with children, so they had to do that plot in a later episode in a slightly different way. There'll be important things that happen with Rhaenyra's other children with Daemon in future episodes, let it be known. While these big reveals are dropping, Hugh Hammer flies Vermithor over Tumbleton, scaring the Greens and setting up his watch over the city as the Gold Cloaks start busting heads looking for the people who left the graffiti, further hurting Rhaenyra's standing amongst them. Like, it does not look like a good situation. And I loved all these final moments in the episode with Ormund, Hightower, and Daeron. Ormund Hightower seems like he absolutely hates the dragons, doesn't want Daeron being affectionate with Tessarion. How dare you say that, she's the Blue Queen. Tessarion also seems like she hates Ormund, which is kind of funny. Like, the feeling is mutual, she would love to eat Ormund if she had the chance. He has a really wild monologue about the Targaryens have a taint in their blood and the Hightowers being the superior men, and Targaryens, Valyrians using blood magic to take what was theirs using dragons, which is meant to be a reference to the realm itself, the Iron Throne, like the Targaryens took the realm from us with their dragons. So the ending of this episode is basically Ormund trying to gas up Daeron as the future king that he wants to put on the Iron Throne, even though Daeron goes full Jon Snow like he doesn't want it because he doesn't want to go against his brothers. It would mean fighting his brothers for their claims. So one of the other big reveals in this episode is that Ormund, even though he is firmly a Green, he's supporting the Greens, doesn't like any Targaryens on either side. He doesn't like the Green Targaryens, doesn't like the Black Targaryens. Ormund then shows his viciousness that Alicent mentioned earlier when he forces Daeron to kill Hugh Hammer's wife's brother using Ormund's Valyrian sword Vigilance. At least he gave him the Valyrian sword to do it. So they also really want to set up Ormund as the architect behind this new plot to crown Daeron in a much more dangerous, unhinged, and cunning foe against Rhaenyra, like a real threat the second half of the season. And the other really big reminder is that he's tainted Daeron now by making him do this in a way that Alicent never wanted. She wanted to keep Daeron away from all this fighting, all this kind of crazy plot machinations, but Ormund puts him right at the head of it. They also use this as an opportunity to give Tessarion a little snack to end the night with. So Ormund hates dragons, noted, but he's not above using them when it's useful, and we have one that just posted up right outside of the city and another one on the way too, 2 Dragonseeds. So what is Ormund going to do to mess with the Dragonseeds' minds these next couple of episodes? Everybody post all your reactions in the comments below, and let me know if you spotted any Easter eggs or references in the episode that I didn't talk about in the video. My episode 5 trailer video will post next. I'll try to get that out as fast as possible. My full episode 5 video will post next week after they release it, so be sure to enable alerts for my channel so you don't miss that. Everybody click here for that episode. I'll update the link as soon as I post it, and click here for all my other House of the Dragon episodes. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.